to quickly introduce the speakers today. So myself, my name is Kait Chapman, and my colleague here, Dr. Jody Green. We are both urban entomologists with Nebraska Extension. Jody is based out of our Omaha and surrounding area office, so the Douglas-Sarpy Counties, and I'm based in the Lincoln office in Lancaster County. And as urban entomologists, our programs focus on bugs, insects, with an emphasis on indoor pests, structural pests, pests with health significance. So bed bugs, obviously, termites, cockroaches, pantry pests, stinging insects, ticks. The list is endless. And then we also do some work on outdoor pests, like what you would find in the garden, particularly this time of year, and beneficial organisms as well. In both our positions, we consult a lot with community members, homeowners, pest management professionals, exterminators, city and county entities, and schools. And we'll talk a little bit more about some resources we have that you guys can utilize at the very end of this presentation. So Jody, do you want to say hi real quick?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jody Green. I am lucky to work with Kait, and thank you all for being here. I think bed bugs are a very important topic for everyone. Our audience is all humans, so thank you for being here.
Thanks, Jody. So before we really dig into bed bugs in businesses, just some general Zoom housekeeping. If you're just now joining us and you are on mute, that is by design. We've muted all participants for the time being. We will have time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. If you do have any questions that come up during the presentation, you're welcome to drop those in the chat. As I mentioned, Elizabeth will be keeping track of those. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat too, tell us where you're joining us from. And we ask that you continue to stay mute. You're welcome to keep your video on if you'd like, or you can turn it off. And then, excuse me, at the very end, we'll also be dropping a link for our post-webinar evaluation form because we want to hear your feedback. Perhaps we didn't cover a topic that you were hoping for, or maybe there's some buggy topics outside the realm of bed bugs that you'd be interested in learning about as well. And if you fill out the evaluation form, after you hit submit, there will be a link you can fill out to get those 10 free bed bug ID cards that we had mentioned during registration. So before we really dig into bed bugs in businesses, I have a poll question for all of you. Can you guys see that? Okay, we want to know, what is your role in the community? So are you in housing? Are you in healthcare? Are you in childcare? Do you work in education like schools or colleges, property management, development, in-home services, or other? And if you have other and you want to add it to the chat, you're welcome to do that too. We just kind of want to see who our audience is. And I think we have a good idea based on some of your email addresses that you use to register, but it's always good to kind of see where the interest lies. Okay, I'll give it 10 more seconds. So you can see our results. It looks like the majority of you are healthcare professionals. There's quite a few people in housing as well, but we have people all across the spectrum, which is great because we had a lot of you in mind when Jody and I put this presentation together. So places of business that are at risk for bed bug introductions. So bed bug introductions can pretty much happen anywhere, but there are areas that are more at risk. And if you think about it, these are a lot of areas that people will spend a lot of time sitting, perhaps a lot of time idle. So we have outpatient healthcare. So there's a risk for bed bugs in inpatient healthcare like hospitals, but outpatient healthcare, you think about waiting rooms, you think about the patient room. In-home services. So if your job or your career is going into other people's houses to perform services, you're at risk of picking up bed bugs and then bringing those home with you. We have things like community centers, just general offices, child care facilities where children are playing and they're going to be napping as well. Schools are at risk too. Libraries have their own bed bug prevention programs in place, and so much more. And when we say more, we think of things that might not typically come to mind. Airports, for example, there's a lot of people that go through airports. There's a lot of idling and waiting around. Airplanes, in addition to that, fire stations, jails, shelters, a lot of different types of businesses are at risk for bed bug introduction. And when I say introduction, I think it's really important to know the difference between what an introduction of a bed bug is and what an infestation is. So when we talk about bed bugs in businesses, a lot of the times we think about introductions. So an introduction is where an individual bed bug is dropped by a person who spends time in an infested place. So when we think about like the context of a doctor's office, for example, this is potentially a patient coming in, sitting in a waiting room. They had a bed bug on their person. That bed bug leaves their person, and then it is introduced to that doctor's office. Whereas an infestation is a population of bed bugs living where people sleep or spend time nearly every night or regularly. So an introduction can transform into an infestation in a matter of weeks, depending on how many bed bugs have been introduced. But a lot of the times when we think about businesses, a lot of people don't sleep in businesses, not saying that doesn't happen, but a lot of times what we're seeing are introductions. And it's important to have policies in place to mitigate those introductions before they turn into those high infestations. Excuse me. So I think it's really important to just take a moment, like what makes a bed bug successful? I think we've all heard about bed bugs. Maybe someone thought it's like, oh, don't let the bed bugs bite. Maybe we've heard that and didn't think they were real, but they're real and they're really successful insects and they're found all over the world. And what makes them successful is one, that they're small. So a lot of times they go unnoticed. Bed bugs, their eggs are smaller than a poppy seed that we can see here on the left figure, and the adults reach about the size of an apple seed. So they're small. A lot of the times they go unnoticed. You can see here a picture of, on the right side, Jody having an adult bed bug on the tip of her finger. So bed bugs are small in size. Another thing that makes them successful is that they reproduce really rapidly. So we think about how long it takes humans to have babies or animals to have babies. Insects take a lot quicker of time. So bed bugs undergo what we call an incomplete metamorphosis. So this is different than what we would think like the classic example of a butterfly. So instead of like a butterfly, which has an egg, a caterpillar, a chrysalis or cocoon, and an adult, it only has these 3 life stages. So it has an egg, immature bed bugs are called nymphs, and then adults. So the nymphs look really similar to the adults, they're just not sexually mature yet. And so, both sexes and all nymphal stages, so as it develops from that first instar all the way to an adult, they shed their exoskeleton to reach that adult stage, and they require a blood meal in order to grow and develop through that life cycle. So that's what makes that blood meal really important. And their rate of development depends on environmental conditions and a steady food source. So it typically takes about 5 to 6 weeks, so a little over a month and a half to complete that life cycle. So when we think about how long it can take an introduction to turn into an infestation, we can consider that. In total, a bed bug from egg to adult and living through its adult life, they can live between 6 to 12 months in like perfect conditions. And then they also have 3 to 4 generations per year as well. And when they reach this adult stage, where the blood meals become important again is that the females also require bites and blood meals in order to produce eggs. So she can lay eggs for up to 50 days after mating once with a male, and in her lifetime she can produce 200 to 500 eggs, and those eggs hatch between 1 to 2 weeks. So when we think about like, oh, we're going back to introduction and infestations again, really it could take one pregnant gravid female to really make a difference between that transformation into an infestation, which is why today we're going to kind of show you the best prevention methods and what to do if you do find a bed bug. Other things that make them successful is that they are excellent at hide and seek. So a couple weeks ago, Jody and I experienced this firsthand, where we went looking for bed bugs in a apartment unit that we knew had them. So they prefer dark, tight spaces, and this primarily is going to include seams, which is why they're frequently found on mattresses and box springs. They can get up in that box spring and they have all that space to hide. This middle picture you see here, we would not have seen that bed bug had we not lifted up that seam. So if we had just looked at it and not touched anything, we would never have noticed that bed bug there. And can any of you spot the bed bug in the last picture? Excuse me. So in the last picture, there's a little teeny tiny bed bug baby that's inside the plastic. It went through the seams of the plastic into this, we call a sushi headband. We're not entirely sure. And then if you didn't spot it, on the second picture, those are actually 2 bed bug eggs right there. So they're really small and they're excellent at hide and seek, and a lot of times they go unnoticed. So really this just reiterates, devoting time, and it does take time, to proper inspection is really important when we deal with bed bugs. And then the last thing that makes bed bugs so successful is that they are professional hitchhikers. So this is how they primarily spread. People travel, they can pick up bed bugs either from a hotel or another infested place. And if things are being stored near beds or sitting areas, they're at risk of picking up bed bugs. So for example, this backpack was stored near a bed and became infested with bed bugs. And when the child takes that backpack someplace, it has risk of spreading bed bugs to businesses, including things like schools, doctors' offices, et cetera, et cetera. And it's also just an important note for travel and proper storage of suitcases. And we'll dig into that a little bit more for the homeowners webinar, but just things to consider, that when you travel and your first instinct is to store that suitcase on top of the bed, maybe take a moment to check the bed first. So why are bed bugs important? And the number one thing that comes to mind is, of course, because they bite us and they take blood meals. So bed bugs will locate hosts or people by sensing carbon dioxide and heat. So that's how they find us. And they feed about every 3 to 5 days. And they do bite and take the blood meals, and that may cause allergic reactions in some individuals, as we can see here on this poor baby in the picture. But over 30% of the population have no reaction to bed bug bites. So once again, that kind of, because they're small, because they're good hiders, a lot of people don't react. So it may go unnoticed for a really long time. And it's also really important to note that the presence of bites on an individual itself cannot diagnose bed bugs. So a lot of you mentioned that you work in healthcare. So there are other things that can bite, other insects, invertebrates. There are symptoms to allergies or other sensitivities that could cause bite-like reactions. So even if someone comes in and they have these bites all over their body, you can't immediately diagnose bed bugs. It's going to take an actual insect or further inspection. So even though they bite and take blood meals, there's always this question of, okay, they're biting me. Ticks can spread disease, mosquitoes bite me, they spread disease. Can bed bugs spread disease? And it's actually quite an interesting answer that a lot of research has devoted to this. And research has shown that bed bugs are able to carry inside their body 45 disease-causing organisms. That includes bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses. But even though bed bugs can carry these diseases, the disease transmission cycle is very different. So they can acquire these diseases, they can maintain these diseases in their body. However, there is no evidence that suggests that they can actually transmit these diseases to people. So even though they might have them, there's been no records of bed bugs transmitting disease, no associated outbreaks. So if someone asks, no, bed bugs do not transmit disease. In addition to bites, there are other negative impacts associated with bed bugs. And this is really important for those of you that may work in behavioral health or housing authorities. So these are things to consider. There's psychological impacts. So there can be delusions, anxiety associated with bed bugs, depression, stress, excuse me, obsession, loss of sleep. There's many cases of post-traumatic stress disorder associated with people that have had bed bugs in the past or are currently battling bed bugs. There's a social stigma associated with having bed bugs. There's negative perceptions by the community, which can reduce self-esteem, cause social isolation. It can strain relationships because maybe your family member has bed bugs and you no longer want them over at your house. So it causes that strain socially as well. And then there's also an economic impact of bed bugs when we think about bed bug management. So people are going to be discarding their furniture and it's going to cost them to purchase new furniture. Eradication efforts are not inexpensive for bed bugs. It takes a lot of effort and that's reflected in the cost as well. People that have bed bug infestations might miss employment or school in order to manage it. And I really want to reiterate here that going along with this economic and the social stigma that a lot of times people think that bed bugs are associated with dirty houses or low-income communities. And it's important to remember that bed bugs do not discriminate. Anyone is at risk of getting them. And while low-income communities are not a higher risk for having bed bugs, they don't have the same resources as others to manage bed bugs. So a lot of the times they're kind of stuck with them, if that makes sense. So we're all at the same risk of getting bed bugs, but some people have more resources in order to manage them and eradicate them. So we're concerned about bed bugs. So what do we need to look for if we have concerns about bed bugs, either in the home or the business? So this is the back of our bed bug ID cards that we had mentioned. So there's really 4 things that you can look for if you're trying to inspect for or diagnose bed bugs. You can look for the live bugs, obviously. Those would be a dead giveaway that there's a bed bug introduction or infestation. As I mentioned, insects, as they develop, they shed those exoskeletons and cast their skins. So you can look for evidence of cast skins. You can look for fecal or blood stains. So they leave behind this black stippling that almost looks like someone took a Sharpie marker and kind of just stippled little black areas. So those you would find primarily on furniture, in those seams, in those hidden locations. And then you can also look for their little white eggs as well that you can see on this picture. So where do we look? If we're looking for these things, where's the best place to look? So you need to look wherever people spend most of their time. So if someone is sitting in an office chair, the chairs are probably where they're spending the most time during a regular office workday. If you have a waiting room, those chairs are where people are going to be spending a lot of time. If you're going into homes, that's an entirely different scenario, but you're most likely to encounter bed bugs in the bed or in a recliner or on a couch where people spend most of their time. So in businesses, this could be waiting rooms, it could be chairs, things like wheelchairs and walkers. Not people don't automatically think that, but if someone spends most of their time in the wheelchair or uses the walker. And then places like childcare, you guys have cots or mats or beds. Those are also important places to look as well. So when we think prevention, we want to, nip it in the bud before we actually get an infestation. So prevention with bed bugs is really key. And so one of the most important things you can do is just take the time, as I mentioned, and incorporate those inspections into regular cleaning routines, especially in places where you have a lot of people going in and out during the day, or like child care centers where you have a lot of kids located in one place that are at risk of bringing something in. So if you regularly clean daily, weekly, incorporate those inspections. So as you're wiping down a chair or going through a desk, just keep an eye out for bed bugs and signs of bed bugs. You can also consider hard versus soft sitting surfaces. And so this is kind of choosing between, do the bed bugs like it or am I going to like it? Because whatever you like, the bed bugs are probably going to like too. So when we think about these soft sitting surfaces with cushions and seams, they have 100 times more little hiding locations, whereas you just chose a plastic or a metal chair like the ones pictured. And then as far as prevention, like early monitoring is really important to catch those introductions before they transform into those infestations. And there's a lot of monitoring tools out there that are available. There's interceptor traps, so pitfall traps, sticky traps, there's carbon dioxide traps. I will say in a home setting, the pitfall traps have been shown to be the most effective monitoring tools, and how those work is you place them on the foot of each bed. The foot goes into the middle of it. They climb up the outside of that little shallow dish trap. They fall in that outer ring and they're unable to get out of it. So they're trapped. They can't climb up onto the bed to bite people. And if you find a bed bug in there, then you know that you have to put in an action plan in place. So those work really well in homes. They could potentially work in situations like office chairs, but it's probably not as realistic to use in businesses. I will say sticky traps, while they are sold in many stores that you would go to, the supermarket or like a home improvement store, they don't work very well. You could use them, you might catch one or two things, but you'll probably catch a lot of things that aren't bed bugs, and bed bugs can kind of wiggle their way out of it most of the time. There are power strip monitors that you can utilize, but most often in businesses, especially schools, as we've discussed with some clients, they use these carbon dioxide monitors. So these are either you can make your own with dry ice, or they have actual machines that produce carbon dioxide that you can run at night in an office building or a school or someplace. And the bed bugs are then attracted to that carbon dioxide and they're trapped there. So using these tools, you can realize that there are bed bugs. And if you do these regularly or regularly enough, you can catch those bed bugs before that introduction turns into an infestation. And then there's also bed bug sniffing dogs, which are not very useful. They're very effective. And there is a company in Nebraska that has, I think, about 3 bed bug sniffing dogs. And they're really cute, but they can sniff out bed bugs as well. So that's a quick way to check an area for bed bugs too. And then when we think about people that do in-home services, so you're going to people's homes, and then you're either going back to an office or back to your own home, and you have concerns about bringing something back with you. I think personal item storage is really important. So when you're entering that home, where are you putting your bag? Where are you putting your purse? Can you leave it in a garage? Can you leave it on the kitchen counter or in a bathtub? Anything with like a hard surface that bed bugs are not likely to be on. And then when you bring them home, do an inspection before you bring it into your residence. Take a look at those seams, just double check. And this can be even in the office. Like, are you storing, like my backpack is sitting right next to my office chair right now. Maybe that's not the most ideal because people bring bed bugs into my office all the time for me to look at. But, like putting them in a storage locker or something where bed bugs are less likely to be is really important. And like I said, it's all about taking that little extra time to really like consciously think about what you're doing and then taking that time to do an inspection of items as well. So what to do if you find a bed bug? So the first step for really any bug or insect that you have concerns about is to collect it for verification or identification. And this is really an important step no matter what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with a bug that's eating your cabbage out in the garden, you want to know what it is that you're trying to get rid of before you do anything. And so here are the topics of the day. So this is the human bed bug. Its species name is Thymic flectularius. There's an adult on the right side and a little bug on the left. So they're kind of oval in shape. As I mentioned, the adults get up to the size and kind of the same color as an apple seed as well. They're flat, so they're flattened from the top. Bed bugs are wingless. We can all say thank goodness for that, right? I think we would go crazy if bed bugs had wings. And then they have straw-like piercing sucking mouth parts. So yeah, I don't know what I was about to say there, but they have the straw-like piercing sucking mouth parts that they use to take meals. And identification can sometimes be pretty challenging. They can look to have different sizes, shapes, depending on how old they are, the feeding status of the insect. So you see here on the left, this is a bed bug that has been unfed, so it's relatively flat. When we look at that side view, you can kind of see its innards through its exoskeleton there. And it's kind of more of an orangey color. Where we get a fed bed bug, it's more of that blood color because it's had a blood meal. So here's where I'm going to have a second poll question, because we're really interested in learning if you've had experiences with bed bugs, or you're more interested in just preventing any experiences with bed bugs. I'm going to launch a poll here about how many bed bugs have you dealt with in the last year? Ooh, this is an interesting mix. Okay, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds here. Interesting. Okay. So it looks like a little less than half of you said never, which is a good thing. You know, you want to prevent bed bugs before you ever encounter them. Some of you once or twice, some of you a handful of times, a couple of you too many times to count. And I'm kind of curious here, and you're welcome to share it in the chat if you want, but if those encounters were through your occupation, and how kind of that went with you, if you're willing to kind of share the story of those. But the good news is that it seems like a lot of you haven't encountered them, but we will go over what to do if you have. So thank you for answering that and sharing. So once again, you know, I just introduced what a bed bug looks like, but why is it important to verify what you found is a bed bug? Well, there's a lot of invertebrates out there, a lot of things out there that people commonly mistaken for bed bugs. And Jody and I, and Elizabeth probably too, know this really well because we do a lot of identifications for people. Bed bugs is obviously a huge worry. And so things that come into our offices that are commonly mistaken are bat bugs. Carpet beetles are really common, and a lot of times you can find them in or around the bed. Fleas, people are experiencing bites and they're seeing small little insects. We have things like head lice or body lice that someone might find that could be misidentified as a bed bug. Ticks, and then non-invertebrate things. We've seen a lot of crumbs come in. We've seen a lot of scabs from people come in. So there's a lot of things that if you're not a trained pest management professional, healthcare professional, entomologist, you might think it's a bed bug or it looks just like a bed bug, but it in fact isn't. And it could be really anything that can be found in a bed or indoors. But I want you to take a look at this first one, which is a bat bug. And you're probably thinking like, wow, that looks almost just like a bed bug. And it's true, they're really closely related. They're in the same genus. They're different species, but they're pretty much brother and sister in some sort of taxonomic term. So from just the naked eye, telling the difference between a bed bug and a bat bug is going to be near impossible unless you're trained. I'm a trained person, and I would not be able to tell you without looking at it underneath a microscope, or comfortable telling you what it is unless I looked at underneath the microscope. And the way we can confidently tell the difference between the two is taking a really up close look, and it's simply a matter of looking at how long the hairs on the body are. So bed bugs have really short hairs that are shorter than the width of their eye, and they're kind of in this nice little neat row, whereas bat bugs have hairs that are longer than the width of the eye, and they kind of like just woke up out of bed, out of the bat nest, and be like, hey, here's the day. So this is how we tell the difference between the two. And you're probably thinking like, I've never heard of a bat bug. Why do I need to know the difference between a bat bug and a bed bug? Well, the fact of the matter is that Nebraska can be a pretty batty place. And we actually receive quite a few bat bugs here in Nebraska. And Jody and I received, this is from Jody's office, so I'm going to let her talk about these results a little bit more and hand it over to here. But this, before I hand it off to Jody, this just kind of reiterates the importance of identification. So why do you need to know the difference between a bat bug and a bed bug? Well, they're treated very differently. So the primary host for a bed bug is a human. The primary host for a bat bug is obviously a bat. They may bite humans if the bats are no longer available to them, but they are not going to be infesting beds, reproducing, biting you every single night like a human bed bug would. And how we treat them is very different as well. So Jody will go over some questions to ask too, because you might find a bat bug in your bed, but chances are you're more likely to find it near a windowsill. And I always give the example of last year I had a daycare call me. They had found a bed bug. They'd contacted a pest management person who told them it was a bed bug. And they're so concerned about what they're going to do at their daycare. Do they need to close down? And I said, well, first, before we do anything, like bring it into my office. And because they told me they had found it on a windowsill. And I was like, hey, before you start paying hundreds of dollars to treat for bed bugs, let's get it identified. And it turned out to be a bat bug. So it's the cost for treating the insect is very different, and the human health standpoint of the insect is very different as well. And thank you for that. And I'm going to hand it over to Jody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And thank you, Kait. This is a pretty good segue, because you can see that actually people thank us when you tell them it's a bat bug. They are so grateful that it's not a bed bug, because bed bugs are one of the most feared things. And if they're like, oh, thank you so much for identifying, the time and the money and all of the stuff that you have to go through, and then to find out that you have bats is, something that people don't want to deal with. I have to figure out how I control this. There. So now that we've identified that and confirmed that you have a bed bug, we want to try to pinpoint the source of the infestation. If you're working, you may know that, which tenant or which house you were at that has that infestation. Other times, if you're in an office, you're maybe not sure who brought it in or when it dropped off, depending on where you are in that office. If you're front desk, you're not really sure. If it's in the exam room, you may be able to tell. So what you want to do then is isolate those possible items or the room that you see it in. So isolation was a question that people want to know about. And I kind of think about when we're trained about, what to do with a pesticide spill, you do the 3 C's, you control, contain, and clean up. So with bed bugs, it's a little bit different, but you want to control that situation. You want to know where this is coming from. If you can find out, and that gets complicated, you want to contain that bed bug. So, collect that sample and get that out of that room. And then you also want to clean up. So cleaning up, treating, it's kind of one and the same, because it's not always going to be about chemicals, as you will soon learn. And then also, perform those actions to prevent an introduction, because just because one was dropped there, that's actually probably the best case scenario. If you find a bed bug in your presence, that's actually good, because it's better to have found it than to be finding a whole population of it later at your house. And then, also, I'm going to talk a little bit about bed bugs best practices checklist, because we should all know what we should do. And maybe we don't all have our own personal best practices checklist, but it's something that you could put together for yourself, for your family, for your job, for your staff, things like that will help you. So the best practices checklist will include, being able to communicate and educate the person or client or patient that you have found may have had this bed bug. And you don't want to, accuse anyone without knowing, but it's good to let people know, because as you saw earlier, some people have no idea that they're being bitten by bed bugs. And so, educating that they actually exist and that they're out there and they're actually a lot closer than we think is one of those things. If you are going into a home or you're going into a place, even, friends or families, if you don't need to bring something in, don't bring it. So like extra jackets or backpacks or all of the things, try not to bring it. You won't always know that where you're going will have bed bugs. So you kind of maybe think about it in the back of your mind. If this place had bed bugs, what would I do? We talked a little bit about, plastic totes and storage for your personal items. My home and my car, it's full of plastic totes, smooth plastic totes with lids to put things in. So things that I want to store in the car. Sometimes I do carpool, kids' backpacks go in there, but also if I were going into a place that I knew had bed bugs or suspected, I would put my own personal things in a clear plastic container and carry those in and leave my, sweater and backpack, purse, whatever, somewhere else. Think about your clothing, what you're wearing. If you want to wear a special, suit or booties, and then also have a change of clothes in your vehicle. If that's something that will be important to you. And I always kind of have one of those too. If you are spending more time in there, you may not want to sit on the furniture that's there. You can bring your own folding stool, and that could be your checklist. This is your way of doing things, your protocol. So that's what you do in every situation. But after you leave, you can do a self-inspection. So before you get into the vehicle, what you can do is, inspect your pant legs. This picture here was when I was going into a place I knew was infested, and I had plastic trash bags duct taped around my pants so that I couldn't bring home any bed bugs on my shoes. But sticky lint rollers are very handy for those purposes. Duct tape, I always have that in my car too, in case I run into ticks. And then, when you get to a place that you have a vacuum, you can always, vacuum your belongings, your vehicles, and then use that clothes dryer, which will come in handy. And I'll talk a lot about that. A place of business definitely needs a bed bug plan, and the things on your plan are going to be different depending on the situation and what your place of business is, but you should always include these things. So how are you going to handle that specimen? And the answer is, you're always going to want to keep that specimen. Who's going to identify it? You're going to report that to? Where's that documentation kept? Because all of these things need to be documented. Who makes the decisions for who gets like when treatment is needed and when monitoring is needed, and who's going to reach out to the client or patient, and what is going to be communicated when that occurs. And here are a few situations that this may come up, and we deal with it quite a bit. So let's just say we're in elementary school. So who handles the specimen? And each plan is going to be different. And if you have a policy or a protocol, if that doesn't work for you, then change it. Just know when you have that to follow it, right? So again, example, keep the bug. Who's going to identify it in that protocol? Send it to Jody. And Jody usually has like an email address that schools can contact in my area. And they'll send me a picture. I'll identify it, have it positively identified as a bed bug. And then they go through the following steps. Business, the building maintenance gets that report. Their documentation goes to a main office. Who makes the decisions here? It's usually the administrator, but who's going to take care of that student is going to be the school nurse. She's going to be the one to isolate the students. And she may be the one that normally it's a female, the ones I've dealt with. So that's why I'm saying that, but they're the ones that may reach out to that family or guardian of that student to explain what happened. They should never send them home. They shouldn't, draw attention to that student because that isn't, that person's fault. When you think about it, that is a family that is suffering from bed bugs, whether they know it or not, and they deserve some empathy and some information to help them out. If it's a dentist office, it depends where that bug is being found. If it's an exam room or in the waiting room, Who identifies it? It might be the pest control company. All of these things have to be outlined in that bed bug plan. And what does the staff do? Do they shut down that exam room for the day? When do they open it back up? Do they have a pest control company on staff that comes and examines it? Do people start cleaning? Do people start vacuuming? All of those things, write that in. Having these plans make it, less likely for people to panic, and they know exactly what to do. They can remain calm and just, not be squishing things and, flushing things down the toilet. Being able to document and go through, these action steps in a reasonable way. So, with a lot of you who are in healthcare, you may be entering homes or doing inspections of people's residences, whether it's landlord tenant, whether it's someone's private home. But again, you want to keep that bug. Who's going to identify it? And identification is so important, as you just heard. And if you are the one bringing a bed bug home with you, or you found one in your car, who do you report that to? That should also be documented, to your direct supervisor. And then what happens? Nobody should ever get fired because of a bed bug or be asked to not come into work, but you can, have the time to self-inspect and follow your best practices so that you feel that you have not introduced that into your own home and back to the office, right? So again, who's contacted and what information is communicated. Sometimes places of business, they could get very bad PR. So have someone be able to talk to the news or parents or patients of what is happening. Because in places of business, those are not usually going to have places of infestations unless it's someone's home, right? It's going to be an introduction. So this is what I always say: you can't control what's out there, but you can control what you bring home. And so you just really need to be cognizant of your actions and what you're doing. I have had bed bug experiences other than this job, probably too numerous to count. I have been bit in hotels about 3 times in 3 different hotels in 3 different states. And I can't control what's out there. I'm an entomologist, but I know that I can bring them home easily. So I do my best to isolate and keep that away. A lot of you want to know, like, how to eradicate bed bugs, and, eradication, is that even possible? What does that even mean? If you look up the definition of eradication, it's going to be like complete, abolishment of bed bugs. And there was a time that they were almost eradicated. I think it's like 1955 to 1995. And then they made this big resurgence, and they're still continuing to be here. There's always going to be some kind of comeback because of their success and because of these things here. So I have this picture of this chicken or poultry house because there are local reservoirs in poultry houses that are completely covered with bed bugs. We are able to travel so widely and freely, international travel. We can introduce bed bugs pretty quickly into many different areas if we're traveling, and dropping bed bugs or picking them up. Insecticide resistance is a really big one. A lot of the products that are out there over the counter for homeowners to use and that have been used for years, after DDT, bed bugs have been shown to be resistant to. So you cannot control them by spraying the stuff that we used to spray, and a lot of the stuff we still are selling. There's a high cost of control, which Kait mentioned. So a lot of people are not going to put the time or money into controlling it if they don't think it's going to help. A lot of times we've got inadequate responses to infestations, and those relationships between landlord and tenants, and who is to pay for it and who's responsible, right? And today we are, selling things, we are buying things at thrift stores. That infested secondhand furniture not only introduces it into a place, but you can have an infestation come right on in. So that's definitely something we need to be aware of. I want to talk about some of the professional methods of bed bug control, because you may be someone who hires a professional to do the work or make some decisions about treatment options. And so these are the 3 that we think about when we're considering like professional treatments: insecticide, heat treatments, and fumigation. And some of you, fumigation is relatively new for bed bug management, especially in the Midwest. So I'll just briefly talk about each one of these. So insecticide, 95% of companies use this method, and they will use a variety of products, ones that bed bugs are not shown to be resistant to or not yet. They'll use residual insecticides in the cracks and crevices because that's where they hide. And so a residual means there's going to be something there so that when bed bugs walk over it later, they will get in contact with that. There's also aerosols and dust for voids in the areas where we can't see, but bed bugs will crawl and harbor. And then contact insecticides. There are products that are labeled for mattresses and upholstered areas that people do contact, but it's a contact insecticide for the bed bugs. So it has to be sprayed directly on them and they will die. The problem with insecticides is that they're not susceptible to the eggs. And so that's why it's often necessary for companies to come back at least 2 times to treat again. So, to increase exposure for those bed bugs. And the cost is usually based on the size and the condition of the area to be treated. This is just a quick chart of some of the products that people are using today that are that were developed for those pyrethroid-resistant bed bugs. And it's a combination of the pyrethroid and a neonicotinoid. So you may see those names come up, those brand names. The second one I just want to mention is heat treatment. And so, it's not, and I want to say like each one of these I'm kind of introducing individually, but you can also have combinations of some of them. But a heat treatment, it's not for every situation, but it includes having, a heat source, airflow, because you want to move around that heat to that lethal temperature. And you need to monitor those temperatures to make sure that those temperatures reach that lethal temperature for bed bugs, which has been known to be 122 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's because you want to kill the eggs and all life stages, so the nymphs and the adults. If it were just nymphs and adults, it would be a lot lower. But because we need to reach that in order to kill the bed bugs, that target is going to be 140 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty hot. And when the people are in there working, the technicians, they're actually in there at this high temperature, moving things around, flipping beds, flipping mattresses to get all of that heat in there. This can be performed in a single visit, but it's usually 6 to 8 hours. There is potential for failure because there's going to be some cold sinks that bed bugs can move away from. But if done correctly, it will kill all the bed bugs in all life stages. The third one is fumigation. A lot of times people think of these tented houses or these containers because we think about termite fumigation, but this can also be used for bed bugs in a really heavy infestation, but it's got to be a standalone unit or structure. You cannot, do a part of a unit or a unit in an apartment building or a room in a house like you can with heat or insecticide. This is because it's an invisible toxic gas that can penetrate through the walls and the cracks and crevices and voids. And that's why this actually will kill everything. That's why all living things need to be out, plants, animals, all of those things. One of these visits or fumigations are going to last like 24 hours. So that family needs to be out for at least, overnight. This is just a comparison because sometimes we need to, if you have my kind of brain, you like to see all of it all together. And you can see that, there are different costs associated here where you can see insecticides is usually by the room. Heat treatment is going to be, a little bit more, and fumigation even more, but you can see some of these comparisons here. So, there are safe and less expensive treatment options, but you want to make sure that that this takes time, it takes energy, and all the effort that it takes, and it really do need to keep monitoring because bed bugs can easily reinfest, and even once you get rid of your issue, bed bugs can always come back, and it doesn't mean it didn't work. It means that it could have been, reintroduced. But bed bug, management it cannot be successful without an integrated approach to doing this. So there's no one silver bullet. There's no one standalone treatment. Sometimes you can do a heat treatment of your home, but also put some residuals, residual products in the outlets, so that when, bed bugs move around, they'll be contacted with insecticide. Because some of the methods, they'll have no resistance, yet there will be no residual. So, those are things to consider. But, the cooperation between the different parties, the residences, the people, your staff, that is very, very important. Also, we get asked a lot, people call and they want to know about financial resources for families that they know who have a bed bug problem. And unfortunately, we don't have those financial resources, and a lot of companies can't offer that work because it costs so much for their equipment and that time and that money to run their business. Sometimes what we have found that there are church groups or community organizations that may pitch in to help with the cost of someone in the community, or help with prep. And this is another thing. The factors that can influence whether a treatment is successful or not has to do with two main things. So that population level of the bed bugs, low, medium, high, and I've got those defined here. And then the clutter level. If you've got a room that just has a bed and that's it, and one person, there's going to be, you should probably be able to know what that population level is and that it's a low clutter. So it would be an easier situation to assess and treat. So, keep in mind, every situation is going to be a little different. There's going to be complexities with social issues. And then, situations like this, which is, not completely unheard of, where there's a lot of clutter or maybe even a hoarding situation. So it's important to not only document what you see and what you hear, because the resident may, or the patient may not be on the same page as what you're seeing. So taking both of the information from both of those sides is very important. Take pictures if you can, collect those samples, and make sure you document what you're seeing, where you saw it, and the dates and the location. And sometimes if you're there, you want to know if they've treated before or if they've thrown something out. So sometimes if you go to a place and there's been no prep by the resident or patient, then you'll see exactly what you're seeing. A lot of times the prep is to make it easier for the people that are treating or inspecting, but the cons are that maybe there was an infested piece of furniture that they got rid of and you don't know where it is, and that could be spread somewhere else. Also, bed bugs can spread to unpredictable places, so it's not going to be as close to the host as we think. One of the most important things that we probably don't say enough is that we do not recommend people discard their mattress, because it's expensive. And just because they're bed bugs doesn't mean they're only on the bed. So you bring in a brand new mattress and that could be easily infested. So we do not recommend that unless they're already going to throw it away. And this is when mattress encasements can be handy. A lot of, some people have different views on it. Some companies will recommend it, but I'm just going to tell you what it does and what it is. So a mattress has got a lot of seams, got a lot of folds, and this dust cover, these little plastic things, all of these places for bed bugs to hide. And the encasement is not like a force field that doesn't allow bed bugs in. It just makes it easier to detect. Quicker detection equals, hopefully easier elimination. But bed bug mattress encasements have really small teeth with their zippers, and they don't allow bed bugs to come and go, because that would be a perfect place. Like something like this, though, where bed bug encasements get ripped, and then it's not effective. But I put the cost here because it may or may not be cost effective. It is, though, if you do not want to throw away your mattress, or if you treated your mattress and you want to encase it. Bed bug mattress encasements have been tested against bed bugs, and they cannot bite through it. So you can treat that mattress, encase it, and then that way you don't have to throw it away. I do have to say, mattress encasements are very difficult to put on. Kait and I put on a mattress encasement on a queen size bed, and we needed an extra person. It is very difficult. So, it's good to know what we tell people to do and how impractical it is sometimes. But just because you're in a place, it doesn't mean that, so this picture here, there are 3 different recliners with infestations of bed bugs. And even low-level infestations can be, they're difficult to locate, but it's especially harder to locate when it's not on the bed. But if you figure out that the person does not sleep in their bed and they're always on the recliner, that's the place to look. That's where it's going to be. If there's 5 spare rooms and no one sleeps in any of them, that's not where the bed bugs are going to be. So the non-chemical options that are effective are going to be on this slide. So vacuuming, totally, people don't want to do it because nobody loves vacuuming as much as me, but vacuuming can be very helpful when it comes to removing, bed bug exoskeletons and bed bugs alone. One of the things we try to tell people is you can use a pantyhose. So you can get these, wherever you get pantyhose. I don't know. I don't even wear pantyhose. It's the only time I buy them is for bed bug work. But you put that in the crevice tool, or you can put it even in the tube. And so that way it collects the bed bugs so it doesn't get into the vacuum. And then when you're done, you can tie that up and stick it in the outside trash after you put it in the freezer. Laundering and drying, so 30 minutes on high heat, that's going to kill all bed bugs, all life stages. So if you can put it in the dryer without getting ruined, you can do that. And even if something says dry clean only, if it's not wet or damp, it should still be fine. Freezing, people want to know about. Freezing still works. You can use like a home freezer or deep freezer, but it takes longer. So it's going to be 4 days at 0 degrees Fahrenheit. And what you can do is you can bag items up that you can't, put in the dryer and put them in the freezer for 4 days. Steam is also an effective treatment, but you have to know that there are bed bugs there, and you have to have at the surface where you're steaming. Let's just say it's like a sofa, 160 to 180 degrees Fahrenheit. So you'd have to have a thermal thermometer or a digital thermometer and keep those readings. That means the steam coming out of the equipment is going to be like 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can be dangerous. You can buy heat chambers for small items. Some schools have that. I know Kait and I have these small heat chambers. They're about $200. You can put your luggage in there and heat that after a vacation. You can take that, schools can heat up clothing for students that have are living with in infested areas, or summer camp. Kids can still come to camp. They just get their luggage heated. The interceptor traps that Kait talked about, these are also good tools for management because you're trapping bugs and you're removing those females that could be laying eggs, and it decreases the bites. But yeah, a lot of bagging and removing items. And then if you don't have anything but wet cloth or paper towel, here's our bed bug card being used as a smashing device, lint rollers, all of those things. These are all effective non-chemical options. Some inexpensive chemical options include some of the things on this slide. I've got things that are botanicals, so things that from like essential oils or neem, things that are dust formulations like Cymexa. There are products that you can use and that are labeled for mattresses, like something called Sterifab, which is alcohol based. You just want to remember to always read and follow the label. I've got the prices down here from what I found just to show you that these are available. And it just really has to do with what, the training. These are still going to be something you would want to read the label and follow that. So things that don't work. And I do have, diatomaceous earth on here, and it does work for bed bugs, but it has to be applied properly. And this is why, even though you can have access to professional or commercial products, it really has to do with knowing the bed bug, understanding the biology, where to treat, having that experience. But everybody loves these foggers or bug bombs, but these do not work. Number one, these are the active ingredients that are that bed bugs are resistant to, so it's not going to work. And this just fills the air with that pyrethroid. So bed bugs, as we know, are going to be in those cracks and crevices and hiding under those seams. So that is not going to work. So save that money, even though it's not expensive. And you can see these are 4-pound bags of diatomaceous earth. So that is why you'll see, 2 pounds like this. And this is an improper application, and bed bugs will just walk right over that. So, if you're going to do something, or, the person with the problem is going to use these products, they still need to use it correctly. When it comes to knowing your rights as a landlord or property manager, and then as a tenant, for Nebraska, it gets really muddy because what is in some of the written documents is, it's required for landlords to require and provide a habitable dwelling. But whose definition of habitable, is that? The state law in Nebraska, it says that, landlords must ensure all renter properties to be rodent proof. But, there's not really anything about bed bugs, even though it's sort of implied responsibility. But there really is no law here that prohibits landlords from renting out properties known to contain bed bugs, where in some states it is required. We also don't have a law that talks about selling used mattresses or refurbished mattresses. In terms of tenants, they're required to keep the unit safe and habitable, whatever that means. They are not allowed to withhold rent or, move out and terminate their lease or hire a pest control company and then deduct it from their own rent. But they are allowed to contact an inspector and pursue legal action, which is a lot of work for those tenants, right? So you can see that it is really not clear. And in a lot of cases, the answer to who pays for the treatment is usually whoever's fault it is. And you can see that, these are really complex situations and you may not know whose fault it is. So it's really important to have this integrated pest management approach and a cooperative approach from all of the parties involved. So, we are able to have access to commercial grade products, but we don't maybe understand how to apply those effectively. When it comes to multifamily housing, a lot of times those units are not all being inspected. And from the research out of like Rutgers University, they have units that are infected. 50% of the people living there don't know that they have bed bugs. And they can move to adjacent units on either side and the room directly across the hall and also the one below. So it's important to be able to gain access and to inspect those areas. So create those plans and follow through with them. And, consider those social situations, because we don't all kind of like live in our own little bubble anymore. People are babysitting, friends are playing. So, think about your play groups, think about who's coming and going from those situations. And, if there's relatives living in the same apartment, you would want to check those as well. So the extension, service is also part of, your cooperative resources. And so these are the things that we do offer. We've got, we're always available for identification, and we do a lot of, do that through, pictures that are sent to us through email. We also have a lot of these resources that are available for you to print out at this link here. This is where Kate's office is, but we've got some of the brochures. We also have it in Spanish, English, and then Vietnamese as well. And then we've got an infographic that's also available in 5 different languages.